Neulenbach Prison, 16th of April 1912. At last, at last, at last! At last alleviation of pain. At last paper, pencils, brush, colours for drawing and writing. Excruciating were those wild, confused, crude, those unchanging, unformed, monotonously grey hours which I had to pass, robbed, naked, between cold, bare walls, like an animal. I again have materials for drawing and writing. Even the dangerous little penknife has been returned to me. I can be busy, and so I will endure what otherwise would have been unendurable. I humbled myself, lowered myself. I requested, entreated, begged for this, and would have whimpered, if there had been no other way. O art, what would I not take upon myself for you? 1st of May 1912. I dreamt of Trieste, of the sea, of open space. Longing, oh longing. For comfort, I painted myself a ship, colourful and big-bellied, like those that rock back and forth on the Adriatic. In it, longing and fantasy can sail over the sea, far out to distant islands where jewel-like birds glide and sing among incredible trees. O sea. Which day? Interruption, change. I have been transferred to the prison of St. Pulten. The constable was very friendly, a good fellow. He did not tie me. I was even allowed to smoke secretly. But the most beautiful part of the train ride was the train ride. I could imagine that I was on a trip. I looked out the window and saw how the fields unfolded as the train passed. It was a slow-going train, which pleased me this time, because I wanted to see a great deal and for a long time. I saw beautiful things, sky, clouds, flying birds, grainy trees, and quiet houses with cushioned soft roofs. Someday. How long is it now that I have been part of the limy walls made leprous by the misery of mankind? How long is it now that I have smelled no cradling white winds over swaying greenery? How long is it now that I have seen no soft cotton clouds, no dewy mornings, no blue twilight evenings, only black, black nights? Does the sun still roll its sparkling giant gold disk in a high arc over the trembling earth? Around me, all colours are extinguished. It is frightening. The place of the damned must be this colourless. A glowing, fiery hell would still be beautiful. And since all that is beautiful confers happiness and blesses, a flaming hell would be no punishment, only the grey, which is part of the endless monotony and wilderness is the true, terrible, satanic punishment. How long have I been a prisoner? I, by nature, one of the freest, bound only to the law which is not that of the masses. Much, much time, an eternity has gone by. Time is variable in length. Time can linger and time can hurry. It is a concept and varies really according to circumstances. Another day, a May day. A walk in the prison courtyard. Roller is surely a great artist, but his prison yard in Fidelio is still only theatre, whereas the painting of the prison courtyard by Van Gogh is the most stirring truth, great art. Trot, trot, around in a circle. How absurd, how always one behind the other, an hour at a time. In the stinking present moment, this ring of trotting men has a less tragic effect than I expected. I was stared at curiously by my prison mates, and I looked back at them with astonishment. They talked to me from all sides. At first I did not understand the spat, hissed, gurgled words spoken from the belly. These were the whispered expressions of thieves and pimps' language. Little by little, however, I gathered what these fellows wanted to know. They wanted to know why I had been buried, that is, arrested. I said I did not know. At this they twisted up their faces maliciously and grinned contemptuously. Actually, even these degenerates still have some contempt left over for others. Most of them also asked if I had a cigarette butt to smoke or chew for them. I had nothing of the kind any more. One, a red-haired fellow with water-green eyes, pointed at my American shoes. He absolutely wanted me to give them to him in exchange for something from him. An older man, a real underworld type, manoeuvred very cleverly to get near me. Almost unnoticeably, he kept pushing himself ahead of others until, shambling along directly behind me, he was creeping at my heels. He asked questions which I did not answer, because I did not understand them. He also asked what I was. I told him. At this he snickered hoarsely, and then whispered something to the man behind him, who then laughed. The laughter, a suppressed dull laughter, went on through the entire ring of men walking in a circle, until it ended with the man in front of me, who doubled over with laughter. He turned his head back, bared his teeth, licked his blue-red lips with his thick, swollen tongue, and said, "You seduced a girl, right?" In a flash it went through me. His suspicion might be the suspicion of the court. Maybe there is a connection between my arrest and the supposed abduction of this strange girl, who by now is surely back with her family or her grandmother again. After this occurred to me, I felt relieved, calmed. I know that nothing can happen to me in this connection, that the abduction will have to be clarified as a misunderstanding, because there was no abduction at all. The business with the strange girl happened more like this. As soon as the weather permitted, I began working in Neulenbach outdoors. At first in the garden of my house, but then farther off, wherever something interested me at the moment. It was then the strolling young lady saw me. She was shy and watched at first only from a distance, but one day she came over, stopped and watched me while I worked. She was holding a catalogue from the Künstlerhaus in her hand, and in such a way that I had to notice. I paid no attention to it. Then she asked me if I too would exhibit in the Künstlerhaus. It was stupid of her, but I did not wish to hurt her feelings and answered only that I am an irreconcilable opponent of the Künstlerhaus, because they are painters in name only, etc. She listened to me in silence, then thanked me for the explanation and left. In this way she approached me a few more times, and when I was working outdoors. But since she asked stupid questions and also had no instinct for the essence of art or for artistic creation, conversing with her was no pleasure for me, and I did not say much. Then I did not see her for some time. All of a sudden, however, I had almost forgotten her already. Late in the evening, during some bad weather, storm and rain, my doorbell rang. Wally was with me, and we were very curious to see who would be coming in such miserable weather and at such a late hour from Vienna, since we had no acquaintances in Neulenbach. I opened the door and saw the young lady, all wet and muddy from the dirty country roads. She was pale and very excited. I led her into the room, which was heated because I had drawn a nude model that day, and introduced her to Wally, who did not appear too happy. Without my asking, the girl started to rant on about fleeing to me, because she could no longer bear to live in her parents' home. She began to cry and protested that she was misunderstood by her people, tortured, fenced in. In short, all possible unpleasantness was inflicted upon her, so that she simply could no longer bear it and would rather flee into the wide world and to strangers, or even die, than stay at home. This was very embarrassing for me, yet I could not say anything because I could not and would not hurt or reject the unhappy girl. At that point Wally helped, making it clear to the visitor that it was not impossible for her to stay with us, not because we did not want to help or keep her, but because we could not help her, since in a day or so she would be taken by force from my house and by her parents, and in this gossip's nest the whole thing would end in a huge scandal. At first the weeping girl only continued to shake her head, but then after discarding her suspicions of Wally, she seemed to realise that Wally was right. She said that she wanted to go to her grandmother in Vienna on the following morning and begged us to keep her in the house, at least for this one night, since she would under no circumstances return to her parents. What should I do? The weather had gotten consistently worse. The storm was raging around the house, which stood relatively unprotected. The rain smacked sheets of water against the rattling window panes. In the chimney flew the wind whimpered and howled, and outside it was pitch dark and cold. And so I told the girl, freezing pitifully in her wet clothes, that she should stay and sleep with Wally. She tried to kiss my hand for this, which I, of course, did not allow. Wally then went with her into another room so she could put on something dry. We ate together, drank beer and smoked, sat for a while, and talked about all kinds of things, and then the two girls went to sleep. I stayed alone and thought things over. The next morning we three travelled to Vienna. At the West Railroad station I said goodbye to the two. Wally went with a stranger to accompany her to her grandmother's, where after all she was afraid to go alone. I had arranged to meet Wally the next day at a specific train in the West Railroad station because I wanted to take her with me to Neulenbach to model again. As I came up to the train station, I did not believe my eyes as I saw the young lady standing there with Wally. She said she had not dared to go to her grandmother's after all, therefore had spent the night in a hotel with Wally, and that now she would return to Neulenbach. I had no objections to raise to this plan, for I believed, naturally enough, that she meant by this that she was returning to her parents. Even when she returned to our house with us in Neulenbach and stayed there, I still did not think it was curious because I thought she did not dare to go home before dark. But it was already uncomfortable for me that she stayed with me so long. However, I said nothing about it. I do not know why not. And so she stayed until night time and again overnight. I decided to speak to Wally after the girl had gone to sleep. I then arranged with Wally that the next morning she make clear to the stranger the impossibility of her staying any longer, and she must take her back to her parents. Something quite different developed. The following morning I was standing at my easel and painting. The girl suddenly cried, "My father is coming, oh God!" And she was right. As I looked out, I saw an elderly gentleman coming through the garden to the house. I did not wait for this ring, but went to meet him. We greeted each other politely at the door, and he said he knew that he had heard from people who had seen her that his daughter was with me, and therefore I should bring the girl out immediately, since I would otherwise come into conflict with the court for seduction of a minor, that he had already filed a complaint, etc. To this I very quietly explained that first of all there could be no talk of seduction, for his daughter, whom I knew only superficially, and in whom I did not have any further interest at all, came to me on a stormy night in voluntary flight from her parents' home, etc., and begged me for a night's lodging. I told him that nothing to her in my house. I told her nothing happened to her in my house, and that she had spent the night with Wally, who, by the way, had been present the whole time. "Where then is my daughter?" asked the father. I said, "Here in the next room," and pointed to the door. At that moment there sounded a cry, then a crash. We ran into the next room and saw the girl lying on the floor with my large paper-cutting shears in her hand. In her fear of her father, the stupid thing had tried to puncture the arteries of her wrists. Fortunately, she was unsuccessful in this. Either the scissors were too dull, the force applied too slight, the girl too clumsy, or she merely acted as though she wanted to do it. After a little excitement, both father and daughter left, reconciled, it seemed to me, with each other. I was glad and considered the matter settled. That seems to have been an illusion. In his happiness over finding his daughter again, the father apparently forgot to retract as false the complaint concerning the supposed seduction, and now, although innocent, I have to suffer for it. I will demand to be presented to the examining judge. It must be some higher official, one who has the understanding for the unusual, and I will explain the misunderstanding to him.